Great to see all of you guys here today as we wrap up a series we are calling Unbelievably Good. And we began this series 6 weeks ago, which seems like forever ago. And people think like 6 weeks is a long time. I don't feel like that. I could go on for 10 weeks like this, but most people don't like it. So we'll stop today. One of the things we tried to set up is a way of thinking about the world. This idea that the gospel is good news for the world. In fact, it's unbelievably good. And how do we get a vision for that? And we talked about at the very beginning this idea of shalom and human flourishing, and that shalom is God's intended state in which we live, which is not just that we have peace in terms of the absence of conflict, but that we have peace that is because we are rightly related. And we started this with, it is a right relationship with God, that we've been reconciled to the Father. We have a right relationship with Him. And from that, we then find a right relationship with ourselves, a sense of truth and integrity and wholeness within us. And out of that place is our hope to have a right relationship with one another, and then to be rightly related to the world, our work and bringing something of value to it, our vocations. We talked about that last week. And so today I want to wrap this up, and I want to really kind of drive us about 10 years forward. I'm going to give you some definitions today that are going to drive us, I think, at least prayerfully, hopefully, for the next 5 to 10 years in and through our church. And so in order to set that up, I have to take you back. This past year, we celebrated 25 years of a church, 25 years as a church. Some of this is just because of the season I'm in my life. I've become more nostalgic. I'm a little bit more reflective and appreciative of some of the things that have happened, some of the things we've experienced together as a church. But I been going back through my journals and go back and read them a lot to remember some of the angst and some of the tensions and some of the frustrations and some of the difficult times over the life and the course of our church. As we started in a home and then in a middle school for 8 years, and then built this building, and just all the trajectory of growth and all the things that have happened over the years, our involvement in places all over the world. And so just kind of really trying to get perspective and grab onto those things. So I often go back to the beginning. And part of, going back to the beginning, I go back to our mission statement. I remember writing this down years before Port City Church was formed. Our mission, for those of you who are unaware, it's on the screen. It says, it's to reach people and help them walk with God. And this has been something that has driven us from the beginning. And it's not a slogan, it really is something that I tried to say, we're gonna put something down that we believe in, that means something to us, and to hold on to this. And it's interesting, about in 2018, I kind of did a re-up on my tenure in ministry and next season of calling and all that. And the one thing that I landed on was that the mission statement means more to me today than it did in the beginning. I find more freedom in being able to because I don't have to convince anybody, I just have to be helpful. And we were thinking about this back in the early days. We talked about reaching people and help them walk with God. And this was never a strategy for how to grow. We're gonna reach people by sending them flyers and posting on Instagram and getting them to come to our church so we have a lot of attendance. That's not what reach is. We say this all the time, but our reach is a litmus test. It's a measure of what we're willing to care about. To reach people is what we are willing to do on behalf of other people, the things that we're willing to do or to care about, and what we're willing to do about the things that we care about. When people live in marginalized circumstances and communities, what are we willing to do on behalf of those who struggle? Like, what are we willing to do? That's what we mean by reach. And then it's always to posture ourselves to help. And I just remember imagining our church, when people came into here, that what if they just felt like that was something that they could actually do, rather than walking in and thinking that, oh, the church does this for me, this is something that we can actually do. I can actually extend myself to another person. I can live and be helpful to other people in finding and developing the relationship that changes the trajectory of everything else. And that was the heartbeat behind that. And we wanted to become a compelling part of how you would see your life, that you felt like, oh, it's not just a corporate sort of slogan, but it's an individual responsibility, that you feel some obligation to that. I hope that it would be a way for you to orient your life and say, I'm gonna extend myself and I'm gonna be available to other people to be helpful to them. As we talked about last week, so that everything that we do, no matter what we do in the world or with our jobs or careers, that whatever we do it in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. We do it as one who bears the image of the one whom we've been created in, and brings something of his desires into the world around us in really tangible ways. And so part of that is you dream about what might happen should that occur. If we actually reach people and help them walk with God, what would it look like? And so you dream this and you go, oh, there might be a lot of people there. And then you start trying to figure out what has, I remember my crisis that I had in 2009 was largely due to the fact we had a whole lot of people in our church. I wasn't sure what to do with this. Like, what do we do? We've got a lot of people. Do we just try to get bigger? Do we just try to get more people to come? Do we just try to entertain people better? Do we just go deeper? Like, what do we do? And so I had to just, it was a really tumultuous time internally because you're having to keep preaching and keep being a pastor of a church at the same time wondering if you should be a pastor of a church. That's a very difficult place to be in if you've ever been in those kind of sort of crises moments in your own life. But one of the things I learned at that time is when you don't know what to do, there's two options. You can pretend, or you can start to ask and get really curious. What do we do with this? God, what do you want us to do? You brought this far. What do you want from this? And this began to open us up into another way of thinking, because one of the things you have to learn is whenever you start something, whenever you do anything in your own vocation, your own life, your own career, your own family, whatever you do, you have a vision for something and it is incomplete. What you can see is helpful and good, but there is so much that you can't see. And it has to be revealed to you over time. You have to keep looking and keep seeking and keep knocking, keep asking. And as this gets revealed to us, and in 2018, our church had been up since 1999, so this is almost 20 years in, and we decided to put together a vision statement. We had never done that before. And the vision statement has actually come to mean more to me than I ever thought it would in 2018. And the vision statement is life with God together for the world. And what it is it's just the starting place where we experience life with God. It's learning to commune with him and to walk with him and to dwell with him. A walk with God equals a life with God. So that was kind of self-explanatory. And then together, well, of course, together, right? Everybody loves community. Everybody loves being together. You know what? Until when? Until you're in community and you are together, then it's not nearly as much fun as it is in theory. Working with people is difficult, right? Would you agree with that? Like being together in things. This is why it's easier to go find your tribes and just lock up in little huddles of people who already think like you and believe like you and act like you and just take on the rest of the world. But the call of the church, what God is doing is he's saying that in him, we experience a kind of unity that is unique and different in the world. So how do we leverage this and lean into this and experience this really on behalf? And then the last part was life with God together, right, for the world. And I grew up in the church. I knew what the church was against. I couldn't really tell you what the church was for. I'm like, we better work on this. And I can tell you what we're for. We are for the redemption of all things. We believe that God intends to redeem and to restore all things, and we are for that. So we work in every area and every issue. We say, how can we be and act redemptively here? How can we bring redemption there? How can we act redemptively here? And that's always our posture in all of these places, no matter what issue we're facing. And what happened is during those years, and it really started years before, about maybe 10 years prior, and I began to try to really understand, like, okay, God, what are you doing in our community? What are you doing in our region? What are you doing in the world? And trying to recognize that because it's easy to think that you don't have the bandwidth to care about more than you do already. Because we're just trying to survive, we're trying to live. And so I began to recognize, I said, my heart's got to expand. I read a quote, and I think it was from John Piper. He said this, he said, your heart will shrink to the size of its greatest concern. And if your greatest concern is you and your little world, you're going to live a very small life. We've got to learn how to let our hearts expand and be broken by what's happening in the world. And that's what began my journey, and it's still a steep learning curve for me. But as we begin to think about this, we oriented our church, and many of you have experienced this when you hear about encounter teams. We've oriented our church and really hired and staffed around mobilization to move our church into places in our world that have great need. You heard earlier about a trip that's working with Enlace in El Salvador. In El Salvador, is that right? Did you say that, Clay? It was El Salvador. And so we have places all over the world doing stuff. And but it's moving us in. If you go to Encounter the City, you'll hear the three emphasis of our church. They're working on basic needs, just food and shelter and basic things for people. Empowerment, how do people kind of develop economically, and then also racial healing. These are three big principles. When you take Encounter the City, you'll hear about these things. All of our partnerships are around these areas. And we began to look at this sort of holistically. How can we leverage our church? There are three big areas that I use is food security, it's meaningful work or economic development. People need jobs jobs and ways in which they can provide for themselves. And then you have to have housing. And we've been working on these things in a lot of different areas, from being on different organizations and working with different partners and trying to understand this better. But these are the way in which we can actually make a difference and move into places meaningfully. In fact, I was just in a meeting this past week talking about affordable housing in our area. We live in a spectacularly beautiful area. And people want to move here, and people are willing to pay enormous amounts of money to live here. What is created, and this is not just in our area, but it's really starting to happen all over our country in the United States, particularly in the larger cities, but it's an affordable housing crisis. This year, they estimated in our community that the stats said that there are 86% of people who are experiencing homeless, it's their first time they've been evicted or their rents have gone up, and that's the reason. We're seeing that in a lot of our benevolence here. People can no longer afford to live in the houses that they're in, and so they're having to move out with nowhere to go. And this is happening in our community. The statistics tell us that 54% of those who rent homes are struggling with the cost to stay in those homes. And then it goes for people who own their homes, about 22% of people who own homes are struggling with staying in them, whether interest rates are going up or equity lines or whatever the cost is of staying in our homes. And the price just keeps going up and up and up. We know this. What this means is there are people in our congregation who this is your life. You're trying to do whatever you can just to stay in the place that you are. When I was buying a house, and these are the estimates a generation ago, the cost of a house was between 2.5 and 3 times the median income. Today, the cost of a house is between 6 and 10 times the median income, which means that more and more people and what's happening with that is the real estate values get up, and it's a system. It's a system of interest rates and a system of equity. It's the system that we live in. And this is what's creating or causing or continuing and perpetuating this idea. But we have to figure out how to do this. And here's where I'm going with this. This is not just about housing, but it's about what you and I do in the world. And in Jeremiah 29, actually Laura Bullock was speaking on this at the meeting last, I think it was Monday night or Tuesday, I remember Thursday night. It's been a long week. And so she was speaking on this, and she was using this passage as I was using today. And what she talked about was so brilliant. I wanted to just kind of use some of that today. Laura Bullock she's the executive director of Vigilant Hope here in town. She's also the spouse of one of our staff members. And so this is from Jeremiah 29. Jeremiah is a prophet prophesying to Israel, and he's basically saying, look, you guys better do what God says, or he's gonna bring a country in, they're gonna take you over, and you're gonna go into exile. And they don't do what God says, and of course Babylon comes in, conquers them, and takes a bunch of Israelites into exile or into slavery captivity in Babylon. And here's what God says in Jeremiah, or what Jeremiah records in Jeremiah 29, starting in verse 4. This is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says to all of those who I have carried into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. He just makes it clear, you brought this upon yourselves. And then he says, build houses and settle down. Build houses and settle down. Plant gardens and eat what they produce. Marry and have sons and daughters. Find wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage so that they too may have sons and daughters. Increase in number there, do not decrease. You know what he's saying? He's saying, be fruitful. Take what you have been given and continue to participate there. Right, most of us, what happens when we don't get what we want or things don't work out or we're somewhere we don't want to be? We're just gonna wait. He says, don't do that, don't pout. Build houses, this is gonna take a while, settle in. You're gonna be there for a while. You're gonna be in exile. You're gonna live in a place that you don't belong in a way that you're not accustomed to for a very long time. So build houses, settle in there, be fruitful and produce. Bring what it is that I have done in you into the world around you. And then he says this, and also seek the peace and the prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile. These two words are actually, in the Hebrew, they're really the same word. Shalom. Seek the rightly relatedness of the city that you are in exile in. These are your enemies. Pray to the Lord for it. Why? Because if it has peace, your peace is connected to it. So I want to introduce you to a couple of terms. A vision for human flourishing, for the kind of system that I'm talking about, dreaming about, praying about, is that this idea of redemption, this vision for redemption requires redemptive activity in radical cooperation. We can put that up there. I want you to be able to see this. It's the one before, there we go. It's redemptive activity in radical cooperation. So these are two terms I'm gonna define for you. But there are two things that matter because this is the way in which things work. Listen, I wanna be very clear. I love the country that I live in. I am grateful for the freedoms and the opportunities. I am grateful to the men and women who serve our nation in the military and law enforcement, in government. I have friends in all of those places. I am profoundly grateful to the sacrifice of so many for the nation that we enjoy. But I want to remind you, and at least sort of put a thought in our minds today, that we can seek the shalom of this world. We can pursue and seek the peace and the prosperity of the place in which we live while holding an allegiance to Jesus as our King, and to live and commit ourselves to live under the rule of God's love. This is, in fact, how we are to live redemptively in the world. And so I want to begin by giving you my definition of redemptive activity, and this is what I mean by redemptive activity. Number one, or this is it. Redemptive activity is the way in which we offer ourselves, right, for the things that God intends in the world. It's the way that you show up and bring yourself to do and to participate and to cause the things that God intends to be more normal or more available or more possible in the world in which you sort of create in and through your life. And this requires a couple of things. Number one is we have to know what it is that God intends. Most of us think that God intends for us to win arguments on his behalf. He does not need you or I to argue for him at all. He is quite competent to do them for yourself, right? I mean, remember like the prophets on the hill, he just brought them down, fire from heaven, boom, killed them all. He can do that anytime he chooses. He does not need us. So what does God intend? When you think about redemption and redemptive activity in the world, what does that mean? How do you bring yourself to that? Number two, it means you have to be willing to offer yourself. You have to be willing to sacrifice. You have to be willing to give of yourself, to forego your way and your thinking and maybe what you would do if you were God in those moments. And maybe the question is you have to consider what is it that you bring from the fruit of your life? Like when you show up in areas now, what is produced? What is caused? Does when you give of yourself, does it automatically produce the things that God intends, or did it produce something else? You gotta be this kind of person. My hope and my prayer for us as a church, as a congregation, is that we can become the kind of people who can be entrusted with this kind of life and with this kind of responsibility to bring this to bear in the world. This is a kind of people that requires a depth of character that is just frankly rare in our world. It's so easy to live shallow and surfacey and manipulative and to conceal. It's just easy, and the world actually rewards that. Most people just want you to produce better than anybody else and you'll be just fine. For us to learn how to develop a depth of character and a kind of integrity and the will to trust, it's just gonna be a choice that we decide to make. The currency and the rule of God's love is trust. It's the way we experience his love, is by learning to trust him. It's the way that we experience the love from one another, is by learning to trust each other. We have to commit ourselves to this. My wife and I, we have a new favorite pastime. We watch a lot of documentaries, which is a lot of fun. And there's a Netflix, it's like there are so many of them. I don't know how many are true, but a lot of them are good. We were watching last week, there was one, it's a new one out on the Thunderbirds. I don't know if you've seen this or not. Thunderbirds, it's the Air Force aerial show team that fly the F-16s, the fighter jets. It is, y'all know what the Thunderbirds are? The airplanes? Unbelievably cool. These guys, men and women, they have female pilots now, but they get in there and they're famous for their diamond formation, which is where 4 planes fly in this tight diamond and they just zip through the sky. It's so crazy. And they're talking about this like they're talking about reading a book or something else. One guy said, he said, the canopy of my jet is 18 inches from the wingtip of the next guy above him in the formation. 18 inches. I'm like, you sneeze and it's all over with, right? And they're just talking about this like it's just a normal day at work. And so they're going, and Thunderbird 1, they call him boss. And he's the guy in charge, the leader of the squadron, and he's talking about getting into the diamond formation, he says this. He says, when I set, and he's very aviational. He says, when I set my vector, it is determined at this range, and that trajectory will take me straight into the ground. And I'm like, did he just say? And he said, that's right. I set a trajectory of my aircraft that will take me into the ground. If I follow it, I will crash. And he says, then, and they rotate their pilots. So the number 2 comes in, and the number 3 is a rookie. So he's explaining this to 3, because what happens when number 3 comes in, he's got a trajectory towards the ground. Like you're in a F-16, 600 miles an hour, and you point your plane at the ground until number 3 comes in, and he sets in just underneath the wingtip of number 1, and the lift from his aircraft changes the trajectory, and off they go in the diamond formation. Their motto is blind trust. I'm like, you gotta be kidding. This guy, think about this. He is setting his aircraft pointed to the ground, trusting this other dude is gonna get in there just so and change the trajectory of everything that they're doing. I thought, you know what that's called? That's called radical cooperation. That's being willing to give yourselves to one another in a really profound way. And in order for us to learn how to live like this and to bring this to bear, we're gonna have to experience the same thing. So here's what I mean by radical cooperation. Radical cooperation, again, you can take a picture. You're not gonna understand this for 10 years. I'm not gonna understand this for 10 years. We're just gonna put it out there and see what happens. And it's gonna sound like it's more like anarchist than it is. I'm not for anarchy. Radical cooperation is our willingness to work together for common good and for collective flourishing. We're gonna have to have vision for this. A lot of us are so content with just making sure that our tribe is just fine. And for the common good and collective flourishing is gonna require something of us that we just really haven't seen done very well. And I'm just sort of inviting us, can we consider this and perhaps experience this together? But we're gonna have to do this in ways that define conventional wisdom. I know how things have always been done. I know what kind of results we get from doing the same things over and over and over again. I don't think that's sufficient for the future. We're gonna have to be willing to do things that defy conventional wisdom and subvert the unjust systems that preserve the status quo. There are systems that we have in this world that are just always going to disproportionately affect one group at the expense of another, or advantage one group at the expense of another. That's just the way it is. And we're gonna have to find ways to subvert those systems. I'm not talking about overthrowing things. I'm talking about moving in and under them in ways to seek the welfare and the prosperity of the city, to find places we can move in this way. Radical cooperation. This is always personal and it is always relational. One of the things that bothered me years ago as a church, we became very machine-like. You could come in, get you an email, we could get this, and you can move through our programs quite mechanically. I remember telling our staff, I said, we have lost our capacity to be personal and to be relational. We've spent the last 5, 6, 7 years trying to regain that back. And so there's a lot of things that you'll see, the way you connect here through the center, the way you fill out connect cards and get phone calls, all those things are our attempts to say we're gonna be relational, we're gonna be personal. Like what we need is there are people who their trajectory is into the ground. And they need someone to sort of move right into a spot just enough to change the trajectory of their lives, to cooperate radically with one another, to begin to change and move the trajectory of a lot of people's stories and lives that we know. And this requires something from us. It is always relational. The church that I have grown up in, not just my church individually, but the collection, the solution was always to teach your congregation and mobilize them to vote for the right people so you get the right law so you can finally do what needs to be done. And I'm like, that has not worked and it's not going to work. It's the wrong system. We are supposed to be moved and mobilized into those places to do that work as God's people, bearing witness of this other possibility of the way life can be. And this is how James taught us. We started in James, be doers of the word and this idea, and he closes. It's really interesting how he moves through this book later on in James. James chapter 3. Who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good life. By deeds that are done in the humility that what? That comes from wisdom. Humility is a byproduct. Humility is a byproduct. You don't try to be humble. What he's saying here is that there's something that happens to us as we learn to be wise. Do you remember a couple of weeks ago, it was a long time ago, we talked from Psalm 51, God desires truth in our innermost being. Remember this? Being a kind of person? No? Just a couple weeks ago. God desires truth in our innermost being. It is there in the hidden places that he will make known to us this wisdom. And what this is the integration. This is where our lives begin to find a sense of wholeness. And we find that we learn how to live like that out of ourselves. This humility becomes this goodness comes out of our lives and into the world. That's what James is saying. You wanna know who's wise and understanding? Just watch how people live and you'll be able to tell. But he says, if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. And this is really where the English language sort of doesn't help us a lot. Because what it sounds like, it says, if you have bitter envy and selfish ambition, don't boast about it or deny the truth. And so you're gonna go like this, well, I have bitterness and I have bitter envy and I have selfish ambition. So I'm gonna go, I have bitter envy and I have selfish ambition, right? You're gonna boast about it. That's not what it means. To boast about it really means don't put your stock in it. Don't put weight to it. And so falsify the truth. That's probably the better translation. So if these two things are sort of harbored in you, this sense of drive and selfish ambition and this chronic competitiveness, don't operate like that and falsify the truth and deny or undermine the reality that God's called us to. And so the thing you've got to test yourself on is what is it that drives you? None of us would acknowledge that we're full of selfish ambition. But what is it that drives you? Is it your own needs and your own desires? And once you accomplish all those things, then you'll be able to do these other things. This isn't wrong or bad. It's just a test. You got to check yourself on this. How driven are you by competing or comparing yourself to others? Like this happens so insidiously. How we, especially for the younger generation, like everything is comparison. It's looking on social media and trying to figure out if you are like that or not, and then how do you get there? Don't depend on this, right? This undermines these things. And then when he goes on and says, this wisdom, this way of life does not come down from heaven, but it's earthly, it's unspiritual, it's demonic. For where you have this way of life of envy, competition, and selfish ambition, there you'll find what? Disorder and every other evil practice. The wheels come off. We live in a world that is marked by this way of life. It's marked by this wisdom, this way of thinking. It's marked by violence and division and obsessive competition with one another. We live in ways where people silently struggle while trying to keep up with some standard of life and inherited expectations, and you don't even know where they came from. You just feel it. We live in ways where we feel like in order for someone to win, someone else has to lose. And one of the things that's interesting about Jeremiah and the Bible, by the way, as people who follow Jesus, as people in the world, we need to consider ourselves more like exiles than citizens. We are exiles in Babylon. We live and operate in a system that we do not belong to, nor are we obligated to in the same way. Our allegiance is somewhere else. And we have to have vision for this. When Jesus looked out on the condition of the world, he didn't see them as enemies. You know what he said? He looked at the people who were eventually gonna kill him. And he said, oh my gosh, they're bewildered and they're helpless. They're like sheep without a shepherd. He had compassion on them because of their hapless wandering and incessant searching for something. In fact, Dallas Willard writes this is brilliant. But when Jesus was on the cross, this is what he says. When Jesus was on the cross and he prayed, Father, forgive them for they know not what they do, Jesus was not merely being gracious or generous to his executioners, but he was stating a profound truth about human nature. They don't know what they are doing. Like we just don't get it. And so here comes this wisdom from above, and this is how James describes this. This wisdom that comes from above is first of all pure. It's just a pure source. Then it's peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. It just gives us a list. Peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness. There are these two kind of ordering systems to our lives that we have to constantly reorient ourselves. But there's another kind of wisdom that comes to us, that comes from above. And when we think about this isn't just like downloading something from somewhere else. This is actually deriving identity from the place we belong. The Bible describes like this a lot. Paul specifically talks about it like this in Philippians when he's talking about this pull of desires. And he describes one as just sort of given over to their own desires. And he says, their destiny is destruction, their God is their stomach or their appetites, and their glory is their shame. Because their mind is set on this life apart from God, this earthly wisdom, these earthly things. But our what? Our citizenship is where? In heaven. Now, when you hear that, what do you immediately think? Oh, that's where I go when I die. No, that's how you are to live while you are here. We are citizens. Have you ever been to another country? You don't like forsake your citizenship. You walk around Italy as a citizen of the United States, right? You understand where you're sitting and you derive things. You're in a different culture. You have to navigate differently, but your citizenship is somewhere else. It's the same principle. We have to learn how to derive this kind of way as citizens who actually belong there. We have to readily recognize that the systems and the culture that we live within are not our own. We have been taken from one dominion and into another. And so James then gives us a list. He says to be, first of all, peace-loving and considerate and submissive and full of mercy. So here's what I want us to do. You notice this again at the bottom, that this wisdom is impartial and sincere, and then he calls us something, peacemakers. Remember this from last week? Jesus said, blessed are the peacemakers. And this isn't like just going like keeping the peace, trying to make sure nobody fights with each other. This is like an assertive, creative kind of act. It's cultivating and causing and making. It's bringing something to bear. You're bringing shalom. You're making shalom. You're creating shalom. We do this with all the ways in which we live in our lives. All the things that we do and bring into the world cause us. So there's two questions I want to leave you with today. Number one is how do I, not me, Mike, but how do I cooperate or contribute to what God intends? How does your life and the arrangement of your life and the activity of your life, how does it contribute to what God intends in this sort of flourishing, this common good and human flourishing in the world? How do you show up to work? I heard 3 different people talking about this sort of, this class warfare kind of idea, and they're saying, my employer is never gonna get my best. As though they're trying to do something like we steward things. We do this as one who bears the image of God, not working for anyone else, but we do it for a different glory, a different reason. We have to learn how to navigate all the chaotic things that happen in our world faithfully and full of hope. Driving wisdom, driving discernment. Lord, how would you have me be in this? What are you contributing to what God intends? This is a really important question for all of us. You know, the old school was just like you show up at church, give your money to church, and then you can feel good about yourself. It's not so anymore. You should still show up, you should still give money, right? It's helpful. But there's the work of the church in the next 10 to 15 years is gonna be far more outward than it is inward. And it's gonna require you and I understanding and trying to say, how can we give ourselves for what God intends, redemptive activity? And number 2, the second question is, how do I cooperate with others for what God intends? We know how to cooperate, to get into clubs, fraternities, sororities, classes. We know how to cooperate to make money. We know how to cooperate to get a deal done. We know how to cooperate to buy stuff. We know how to cooperate to plan. We know how to do that. Do we know how to cooperate to bring redemption into the world? To move into places and actually change the trajectory? Do you realize In a conversation, you can change the trajectory of what someone feels or senses or believes or understands or hopes. At any given moment, we can add to the chaos, which is not hard to do, or we can contribute to some kind of hope and healing and redemption. And this is not natural or easy or quick, but it is essential. It is essential. There are massive issues to tackle, and we're working on some of them in our community, and we'll hear more about that. But when it comes, so there are massive issues when it comes to redemptive work and restorative work in our world. I get that. But it actually starts quite small. It starts with what you and I are willing to do every single day when we show up in the places that we show up. With the opportunities we have, the responsibilities we have, with the tasks that are in front of us, and to do them faithfully and full of hope. To try and derive and understand, like, what is happening here? What is God doing? How is this working? And have conversations and continue to work together to better understand these things. It's the way you show up here in our church that makes a difference. If you show up here and you're going, hope Mike's good today and doesn't go past 11 or 12 or whatever time it is. Or you can come in and say, I wanna be together and to participate and bring something. Because it changes how we are when we're together. This is true of everything that we're asking us to do. God's intention is that things would be returned or restored to shalom, to be rightly related. It's interesting when you go back to James chapter 3. The last verse, verse 18, he says, peacemakers, these people who are willing to create and make shalom, they sow, those who sow, who offer their lives in this way, will reap a harvest of what? Of righteousness. You know what righteousness is? Remember this? It's rightly relatedness. Like, this is how God's work gets done, is when you and I decide to live as cultivators and creators of shalom and offer ourselves, and we will reap a harvest of what God has intended all along. We need tremendous wisdom and discernment in all these things, don't get me wrong. But we have to find ways in which you and I consider the trajectory of what we bring in every single moment and learn how to navigate the chaos of this world faithfully and filled with hope. This is what he came to do. The bottom line, and the way I want to close is this. This is my hope and my belief, but it is unbelievably good that this is unbelievably available. So we'll see what the next 10 years holds, right? Jesus, you are our King, and we confess our allegiance to you. You've said, blessed are the merciful, and blessed are the meek, and blessed are the peacemakers. So we ask you to guide us, to reveal to us, to help us willing to trust you, to help us willing to trust one another, and to find and to see and to act in ways that actually shape trajectory for the people that we come in contact with, for those relationships we've been entrusted with, the responsibilities we've been given. I ask you, Father, to do this on behalf of what you long for. And so I pray all these things to you in the name of your Son, Jesus, who is our King. Amen.